Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something I think you'll find pretty interesting. We're looking at crowds.
Yeah, those masses of people we see every day. But we're looking at them through the lens of this fascinating conversation between two Japanese artists and podcasters, Hideki and Mayumi.
Right, they had some pretty unique takes.
Yeah, they actually view crowds as having their own kind of energy field.
Crowd energy.
Hmm, I know, it sounds a little out there, but stick with me.
Mayumi's point is that a crowd has a collective vibe, almost like a mood. It's a reflection of everyone's emotions and interests all kind of mixed together.
So, like, if you walk into a library, it's super quiet,
Yeah.
focused.
Everyone's there to work or learn.
But then you go to a concert, it's completely different. Total excitement, adrenaline.
You got it. Mayumi actually compares a library to being in a busy supermarket during rush hour.
Oh, wow.
It's chaotic, maybe a bit stressful, but there's definitely energy there.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's funny how we just instinctively pick up on those vibes, you know? You walk in and instantly adjust how you act without even thinking about it.
Oh, for sure. And Mayumi talks about that too. She describes these two different ways of walking through crowds.
Oh, yeah. Surfing and harmonizing.
You remember.
Like with surfing, you're keeping a steady pace and trying not to get swept away by everything going on around you.
Especially in super busy places.
Like she mentioned, Takeshita Street, that super crowded shopping area in Tokyo.
Exactly. It's like you're riding the wave of the crowd's energy, but not letting it totally engulf you.
I get that. There are times when I'm in a crowd like that and I feel like I'm just being pulled along, almost losing track of where I'm going.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Then she contrasts surfing with harmonizing.
Right. More like if you were just strolling down, say, Omotesando.
Yeah, it's more upscale, more laid back there.
And you just slow down, enjoy the atmosphere, go with the flow.
Exactly. You match the tempo of the crowd instead of fighting against it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that mind over mental idea that Mayumi talks about comes in.
Right. She made a point of saying it's not just about our thoughts, it's our whole way of being.
And that actually reminds me of something else she brought up about how big companies are offering those mind-focused consulting services.
Oh, yeah. Not just for businesses either, but for individuals too.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? Mayumi learned from someone involved in that world that major companies are investing in their employees' mindset.
Mm. Mind consultants. I've never really thought about that. What do they actually do?
Well, think of it as coaching, but for your mindset. Helping people develop strategies for better focus or dealing with stress.
Ah, okay. So it's about giving people tools to handle things better, even in crowds.
And I think that's why Mayumi's perspective is so valuable. It's like, hey, we actually have a choice in how we experience all that. We don't have to just get swept up in it all. We can choose to be more mindful.
It all ties together, huh?
It really does.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
Well, think about where Mayumi was broadcasting from.
She was at the AC Hotel in Ginza, right?
Yeah. She said she specifically chose it because of its stylish but compact design.
Right.
It's a little detail, but it really kind of hints at how she approaches things, don't you think?
Yeah, she's definitely intentional, even about the little stuff.
It makes you wonder, what other areas of her life does she approach with that level of intentionality? But I think we have more to talk about from this conversation, so let's continue this in part 2. Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into this conversation about crowds.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about that whole crowd energy idea.
It's a fascinating concept, right?
Totally. And remember how they were talking about observing crowds for inspiration?
Yeah. Mayumi suggested actually spending time in bookstores.
Bookstores, huh?
Yeah. And paying attention to what sections people gravitate toward.
Oh, I see what you mean. So instead of just looking for what you like,
Right. You're looking at what seems to be catching everyone's attention.
almost like what's trending in real time.
Exactly. It's like organic market research, especially for creators.
I'm picturing myself wandering through a bookstore watching people.
It's like a treasure hunt for insights, right?
Yeah.
And it connects to this bigger idea that Mayumi was talking about, balancing personal vision with understanding your audience.
Right, that cooking analogy, like you might love a certain dish.
Your signature creation.
Yeah.
But if you're cooking for guests,
You got to consider what they like, right?
you got to find that sweet spot where your passion meets what resonates with others.
And checking out those bookstore crowds is like one way to get a feel for that.
Right. It reminds us that creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. We're all influenced by what's around us. And that shapes how we connect with others.
Speaking of connecting,
Yeah.
Hideki said something really interesting about that whole process of putting your work out there and building an audience. He saw it as its own kind of crowd navigation.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like you're trying to find your way through a sea of voices.
Yeah, especially in this digital age, right?
It's a whole new set of skills. And sometimes that means stepping back from all that noise. Remember Mayumi talking about the importance of solitude?
Yeah. She's all about that quiet time for introspection, for connecting with her inner voice.
It goes back to that mind over mental thing. It's about creating a way of being where you stay focused, even with distractions, like finding that inner sanctuary.
You got to find that balance to navigate those digital crowds just as much as physical ones.
You got it. And that balance lets you express yourself authentically while still connecting with others.
It's like a dance.
Love that analogy. And that dance, well, it leads us to the last part of this conversation, how all of this ties into personal growth and well-being. But we'll save that for part 3.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the final part of our deep dive into Mayumi and Hideki's conversation about crowds and everything else we've managed to connect it to.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack, right?
Seriously.
Yeah.
But we haven't even gotten to how all of this relates to, like, personal growth yet.
Right. And I think that starts with that whole mind over mental thing that Mayumi kept coming back to.
Yeah. She was very clear that it's not just about what we're thinking. It's about, like, our whole approach to being in the world.
It's our mindset, that all-encompassing thing that shapes, well, everything.
Our actions, our reactions.
How we experience things. But the cool part is, it's not set in stone.
It's something we can work on, right?
Exactly. We can actually cultivate a more positive, a more resilient mindset.
It's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through mindfulness or just by paying more attention to our thoughts and feelings.
Be more intentional.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that gives us a sense of agency, of choice,
We get to choose how we respond to challenges.
and how we approach opportunities. And that's not about being happy all the time. That's not realistic.
It's about being equipped to deal with whatever comes up.
Exactly. It's like, remember how Mayumi talked about surfing and harmonizing with crowds? That's a metaphor for life, isn't it?
Sometimes you got to power through. Sometimes you got to find that flow.
And being aware of your mindset, that helps you make those choices.
It all ties back to that intentionality. Like Mayumi choosing that specific hotel room. It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Even the small stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows that we have more control than we think. And it reminds me of that other thing Mayumi said about making time for solitude.
Oh, yeah. Super important in today's world.
So much going on. So many distractions.
We have to make space to tune in to ourselves.
To connect with that inner voice, figure out what we need.
It's all about being friends with your own mind.
And when we do that, we can show up more authentically in everything we do.
Right. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
You know, mindfulness leads to self-awareness, then more conscious choices, and ultimately that leads to a sense of well-being.
And that, wouldn't you say, is what Mayumi and Hideki were really getting at?
I think so. It's about understanding that we can shape our mindset, which shapes our reality.
This has been so insightful.
I agree. We've just scratched the surface, but I do want to leave everyone with one last thing to think about. Mayumi talked about crowds as energy fields.
Yeah.
So I ask you, our listener, what does the energy of your usual crowds say about the places you're choosing to be?
That's a great question to consider. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into crowds, mindset, and the power of making intentional choices. We'll see you next time.